weebs, bobs, and a lot of fan service. These were the ingredients chosen to create the perfect hentai, but Professor Lilith accidentally added an extra ingredient to the concoction: predatory monetization. Thus, Action Taimanin was born!
Using the horniness of the weebs, the game got a positive rating on Steam, even though the game is trash. Before we start this whole thing, I want to make something very clear. I despise gacha games, and I think the normalization of such games is boring. Gambling is heavily regulated for a reason. It's addictive, and the house always wins. The only reason we don't have heavy regulations in the mobile market yet is because the law is extremely slow and technology is extremely fast. For anyone that thinks this game should get a pass because it's a mobile game, off. It has a PC port, it's on Steam, it clearly wants to play with the big boys, and it will be judged as such. With that out of the way, what is Action Taimanin? Action Taimanin, or AT for short, is a third-person hack-and-slash and visual novel hybrid that works on PC and on your smartphone. The Taimanin franchise originated as a hentai series. The series focuses on ninjas with special powers that are part of a government organization that combats monsters from hell. The main protagonist, Igawa Asagi, gets captured in the very first episode of the very first installment by the Taimanin traitor Oboro. Asagi's sister Sakura learns that Asagi got captured, and so she goes out to search for her sister, but gets captured immediately as well. In the following episodes, Asagi is forcefully loved by ogres and tentacles. And if you know what that means, you know. The same fate awaits Sakura, but on top of all of that, she gets a treatment that makes her double Ds into double Gs. It turns out that the Taimanin master was behind all of that, and Asagi and Sakura get forcefully loved by that dude as well. Somehow, Asagi manages to kill Oboro and both flee, killing the old dude at the end of the story on behalf of the government. This is just the first series. There are 3 following installments plus a few OVAs, and all of them follow the same pattern. Taimanin go on a mission, Taimanin get captured, Taimanin get forcefully loved by monsters, or stepsons, or general enemies, and Taimanin kill the bad guys at the end. For such an elite ninja force, they get captured quite often, which makes me question how good they really are at their jobs. On top of all of that, I can imagine that most of the Taimanin have some deep psychological problems after being forcefully loved quite a few times, so excuse me if I find it a little bit cynical that a game is made about forcefully loved victims that uses every trick in the book to fuck with someone's mind so that they spend all the money on the game. Anyways, you're all here for the boobies, so let's just jump right into it. In the beginning, the world is explained briefly. You take the role of a commander and have to choose between the 3 main protagonists. You have Sakura, Asagi, and the lolly, because of course there's always a lolly. I went with Asagi, but besides different looking abilities, they behave pretty much the same. You slash through some bots, you hack through a boss, and we are thrown into an obnoxious tutorial that doesn't even explain everything. Listen, tutorials are hard to make, but one of the things that you can do is give me the option if I want to see the tutorial or not. I can already hear, oh, but it's just a mobile game. Again, off, it has a PC port, it's on Steam, it wants to play with the grown-ups, it will be treated as such. So we jump into the next mission, and if you can't distinguish the first mission from the second one, it's because you could say it's the same mission. So you slash through bots again, you hack through a boss again, then the next tutorial starts. Look at this, it's the gacha mechanic.
The term gacha is Taimanin slang, which means recruiting HR or securing supplies.
Are you sure about that? After that pleasant interaction, the tutorial leaves us alone and we can do whatever we want. The obnoxious tutorial pops up again when we click on one of the meta mechanics, but the tutorial leaves us alone mostly. If you haven't noticed yet, all of this is by design. First they give you a bit of gameplay, then explain how leveling works, followed by a bit of more gameplay, and after your orifices have been lubed enough, they shove the gacha right in. For now we can leave that part of the game alone, but we will come back to it later. By now we should have completed 3 missions, and since every chapter has 5 missions, we should move on. Mission 4 introduces us to one of the story delivering methods, the comms. It's a cheap way to deliver a story because you just have a player model standing around and chat logs with voice acting playing on the side. If you remove this, nothing of value will be lost. Quick side note, the voice acting is in Japanese and it isn't bad, but the quality seems to be hit or miss. Sometimes the audio will be too loud or too silent, the emotions in the voice will go from happy to angry, and the music will also shift abruptly. The last mission in this chapter has a mecha boss with telegraphed attack that just stands in the middle of the arena. It's a simple boss, but it works. After you defeat that thing, we found out that it was all a simulation. And here is where the visual novel truly starts. You have these 3D models in 2D backgrounds that sometimes move their mouths and sometimes move their bodies, but most of the time they stand in their idle animation. What bothers me here is that the background doesn't need to be in 2D because they have the 3D environments as well. The simulation chamber exists as an asset in the game, and in one specific chapter they even use a screenshot of the 3D environment. I think this is done this way because the visual novel will sometimes describe what is happening, and if you had 3D models in a 3D environment, you would need to animate that instead of just describing it. The end result looks lazy and is laughable. The clash between 3D and 2D is too harsh. I mean, most visual novels are already super fucking lazy with their 2D pictures on top of 2D backgrounds, but it's really bad here. The funny thing is that they do 2D characters on 2D backgrounds as well, as you can see in the special events. In the special events, they even use a screenshot of the 3D model of an in-game enemy as a 2D sprite, and it looks ridiculous. Moving on with the story, some dude comes up to you and says that you are now the leader of some task force. Honestly, I couldn't care less. The game is moving at a breakneck speed. First you fight a terror organization, then it turns out it was all a simulation, we're introduced to the main girls, and just like that you're now the leader of a special task force, which you kind of already are, but now you're leader of a super special task force. On top of all of that, there's a little clickable pop-up on the site, sometimes explaining what certain words mean in the dialogue. It's almost like someone wrote the story then figured out that we don't have any design documents, nor were we introduced to this world properly. You know, maybe it would have been a better idea to start with the basics instead of having pop-ups explaining the world. Sometimes it really seems like an afterthought. Once we're done talking to that old dude though, an alarm is triggered and the scene stops. The next chapter is unlocked and we start the whole thing with another visual novel. It turns out that there's a terrorist attack on an airport and your job is to save the remaining survivors and to destroy the terrorists. We're going to skip most of the missions here since they have pretty much nothing important happening in them, and it's always one wave of enemies, kill all enemies, move, repeat until the boss appears, dispatch the boss, mission ends. Mission 4 in this chapter is interesting because they actually have a cutscene. Now, it's not the best thing ever made, but it's much better than the crappy visual novels. It shows the evil antagonist just leaving the airport, but it's making use of the medium we call game. It's at least trying to use visuals to tell a story. It's a shame that in the last mission of the chapter, we go back to the overly wordy, overly explained visual novel garbage. The boss in this stage is a dragon. This boss fight really shows how weird his fighting system is. Attacks from normal enemies are most of the time not glued to you. If you press the dodge button, you will dodge. Projectiles that are slow can be run into, and projectiles that are fast can only be dodged. Now, with most bosses it's different. Even if you dodge at the very last second, there's still a chance that it will hit you, because attacks track you, and since most bosses don't have a turning animation, they will just snap to your location. It's an almost fair system, but it looks janky, and when the game gets harder, you can throw the balance out of the window. Also, there are no more telegraphed attacks from bosses after the first chapter, which is kind of a lost opportunity. Especially on this boss, a telegraph could be shown when the boss charges at you. The best strategy against bosses, at least on easy mode, is just to smack them all the time. There isn't much strategy to any of the fights in easy mode, to be honest. Since the game is about to make a huge leap in the story, I'm also going to make a huge leap here. The chapters, with all the missions, would work better if they were one stage. One stage with waves of enemies and one mini-boss at the end of the 5th wave, for example. It is technically possible because the time trials have this model already implemented. The chapter stages themselves also need some work. While the first chapter has some okay visuals, the second chapter dips a little. Both are fundamentally the same thing, squared areas with invisible walls. What makes the first stage stand out though is the amazing 2D background and the lighting. On the second stage we also have some care put into different kinds of lighting, with the fire having an orange hue, making the parts of the stage that are on fire more orangey, and the parts on stage that are lit by the moonlight, I assume, darker. The background here, especially the last section, takes a backseat. We will see a continuous dip in quality when it comes to environment design the further we go. Time to move on though. After the visual novel explains what we just did, we're suddenly teleported to a school where we meet characters that we'll never see again except in a minigame. We then arrive at the principal's office, which is the same guy who declared us in charge of the special task force. I don't know about you, but being a director and an officer at a government organization can't be really healthy, right? Even if we forget the copious amount of work that those positions entail, there's definitely a conflict of interest here. Imagine if the president of a country was also chief officer. Wouldn't that be stupid? You might have been asking why I'm going to more political territory, but there's an explanation. Even though this game is a booby game, it has some political hot takes, sometimes, especially about China. Here though, we just introduced the next character, Su Jinglei, an investigator of the Chinese Union, and for no reason other than you being young, she hates you. Top-notch writing over here, folks. Even though Su might even be younger than you, she hates you already, but it's a mobile game, right? So, no criticisms allowed. Here's the riveting political commentary that this game displays though. In the Taimanin world, Japan and China always had a rocky relationship since World War II. Japan has been half colonized by the UFS, who is very careful when it concerns dealing with China. I think this is referencing the real world A little bit. Japan and China in the real world are known to dislike each other, and UFS, United Federation of States, sounds oddly familiar to the USA, United States of America. Call me stupid, but I think this case is pretty clear. This game is criticizing how the USA has some unhealthy relationships with China, and how the USA basically westernized Japan after dropping two big boys on them and occupying the country for a while. This whole thing is followed up by the revelation that Mr. Evil protagonist is planning a terrorist attack on the Republic of Vietnam. This might sound familiar, but we'll get there. First, we need to find information. For that, we're going to hunt for Oboro. The next few missions are the exact same as the last one, just new looking enemies but with no change in attack patterns. One thing that stood out here were the side-scrolling sections, nothing remarkable, but it shows that sometimes the devs tried to do something with the limitations that they had. We finally reach Oboro, and her boss fight has the same problem as the other ones. It is especially infuriating here because Oboro has a spinning attack that sticks to you almost like glue. Of course, every boss is beatable, but there isn't much thought that goes into it, and if you have been leveling up correctly, this should be no problem. So after defeating Oboro, Sue starts using advanced interrogative measures like stabbing someone. Sue even makes a direct reference to how brutal the advanced interrogations are by saying,
"The torture techniques of the PLA are known for its brutality."
PLA means People Liberations Army, which is oddly close to People's Republic of China, or PRC for short. So yeah, Taimanin is calling out China for human rights violations. I'm all in for calling out China, but excuse me if I feel a little bit cynical when it's packed in a badly written, badly made booby game that is full of predatory monetization. So after we get info out of Oboro without the torture, we move on to Vietnam, where the terrorist attack from Evil Protag will take place. This whole chapter takes place in the sewer, and here's where we see how the lack of lighting really hinders the visual of this game. Like I said before, chapter 1 had the best visuals, mainly creative background. Chapter 2 had some redeeming qualities, especially because of the fires that have orange hue in them. Chapter 3 was lit flatly but has some cool effects like a street lamp turning on and off. You could still see the difference between the 2D art that is much darker and way more detailed but illuminated by street lamps, and the 3D environment that is less detailed and much bigger. The sewer though is lit flatly and way too bright at the same time. The light seems to flicker out sometimes, which reveals some cool street art on the walls. Other than that, it's pretty flat and boring, and sections seem to repeat themselves. If I showed you the end of section 3 and the beginning of section 4, you wouldn't notice the difference because it's basically the same room. I think by now it should be clear that the combat doesn't really change, so there's no need to repeat myself, right? The boss in this chapter suffers from the same problem of sticking to your character like glue, and also at some point the boss splits into 5 copies that attack all at the same time with long range attacks and almost no delay, giving the player almost no time to react. I don't think this is a skill check. It's more of a check if you have leveled up your character enough. You can do this mission if you are underleveled, but it will not be fun and take forever. I think this is an appropriate time to talk about the nefariousness of the gacha mechanics. Since this boss is more of a level check, you might be inclined to either A, go back to a mission that gives you rewards which you can then use to upgrade your weapon/character, or B, buy gachas so you get the resource that allows you to upgrade your weapons/characters. By doing A, you will be consuming energy that allows you to play a level again and again. That energy is kept, and once it's used up, it slowly refills over time. There's no good reason to ever have energy that lock-offs the main gameplay behind time.
But they have to make money somehow, right?
The only reason there's an energy bar here is to stop you from grinding and advancing your character, especially forcing you to either A, buy more energy, B, buy more gachas, or C, wait. There's no other reason why energy exists in those games. It's just there to torment the player and keep them engaged long enough that they someday buy a gacha to skip the grind, which, by the way, was made by the developers themselves, or buy more playing time, which again is a problem that the developers created themselves. The developers made the problem and now they're selling you the solution. In no other game, be it free or paid, is this mechanic accepted, but for some reason, people are okay with it and it drives me nuts. This should not be normal. Coming back to the mission though. Once you beat Mr. Evil McEvil, it turns out it was just a decoy, and the explosives in the area were also just decoys, meaning that you failed and therefore the terrorist attack was successful. While Evil McEvil just didn't blow up the Taimanin when they entered the sewer is beyond me, but guess what is used to attack the island of Vietnam? It's a gas that transforms the citizens into zombies. And if this doesn't ring a bell, let me remind you that in the Vietnam War, a special liquid was used called Agent Orange, and almost everyone that came in contact with that was disfigured and died. Those who survived had to live with insufferable pain and disfigurements. The difference here is that the zombie gas is used by Evil Beevil and not the UFS, the stand-in for the USA. You might think this is a bit of a stretch, but the reason Evil Sequel doomed an entire island with biological weapons is to show a living hell of madness on air, to disclose the UFS contradiction to the public that they coerce other countries not to use weapons of mass destruction while making their own. Does that sound familiar? We don't stop here though, because this whole spiel is followed up by the following sentences. The streets where the CD gas was born was a district of Chinese people who monopolized 98% of the assets on this island. This injustice ruled by the Chinese Union takes place not only on Kotraro Island, but also all over Southeast Asia. This could be a reference to how China doesn't really acknowledge the legitimacy of some countries in their jurisdiction, for example Taiwan, or it could be a reference to how modern China basically does modern colonization in Africa, for example, where they buy out space, send workers over there, giving the country infrastructure, but at the same time replacing the original inhabitants. Or it could be a reference to ongoing dispute over islands that both the Chinese and the Japanese lay claim over. None of this matters though, because evil antagonists actually just want to make the PLA and the UFS look bad and incompetent. Again, call me cynical, but I don't think this was pulled off very well. The only thing that a terrorist attack does is scaring the living hell out of inhabitants, and how the fuck do you blame a country for not seeing into the future so they can stop a terrorist attack? Even if all of the madness was shown live on TV, this would make the government stronger. People would be willing to give up more rights to the government so they can be protected from attacks like the one from Evil McEvil. The whole China thing is also a little bit forced. I'm all for China bashing. In this case though, the Chinese have nothing to do with terrorist attack. It just happened to be an island where it's mostly Chinese. You could cut the whole China thing out and nothing in the story would change. Since we failed our mission though, our job now is to clean up after ourselves, and so we dispatch the zombies that were initially humans. You know, we could capture the zombies and try to kill them, but dispatching is much faster. Am I right, boys? After dispatching all the zombies in the area, we meet Chief McEvil himself. Again, this boss suffers from the same problem as the other ones, mainly sticking to a character like Lou, and even if you dodge correctly, the attack still tracks you down. This boss has his prize up his sleeve though. He turns into a monster, and I think this is supposed to be like an epic last fight, but the boss has no impact. It looks more like an oversized toy, and funny enough, this is one of the better bosses because you can actually avoid the attacks. One of the things that this game really likes to do though is to spawn grunts the longer the fight goes. It's a very cheap way to make the boss fight more difficult if your boss fight sucks. So after beating the boss, we skip 2 weeks and we're teleported back home where Sue is in her Taimanin outfit, inside of our house. For some reason. The game makes a subtle hint that Sue would have been fucked if the task force was disbanded and she had to go back to the PLA. Sue might have been taken into the concentration camp. It's an actual quote from the game. Of course, the good guy would wear, we pulled our strings so that Sue could stay with the task force, and Sue likes us now because we basically saved her from impending doom. But the twists never end. Remember the obnoxious tutorial? Well, they actually have a 3D model of that character, so why does this tutorial show the 2D art of said character if they have a 3D model for it? I don't know. Also, why is Sue in a Taimanin outfit? Is nobody gonna question that? Oh wait, I know why she's a skimpy outfit. It's there to distract from the garbage story. Keep in mind, this for a while was the last chapter, and guess what happens? It turns out evil ninja boss is still alive. Yep, the big scary big boss from the last chapter wasn't the real big evil. Imagine if people weren't dumb enough to support this game. This is where the story would have ended. On a cliffhanger. Okay, let's move on to the next chapter. Here we introduce the new characters out of the blue, except those actually stay in the story and are not relegated to mini-games. We have Rinko, the swordswoman. Rinko's defining trait is the boobies, and that's it. And Murasaki, who is in love with Asaki, and that's her defining trait. For those paying attention, you might have noticed that I didn't even describe relationships between Ju and the girls, and that is for a simple fact that all of the girls except Asaki are just variations of tsunderes. They all kind of like you, but you know, from here on, we have this weird description of Murasaki drooling over Asagi and again, and Sue being weirded out by that. I don't really get it. It's supposed to mean something. I don't know. Besides, Asagi is not even present in this chapter. No time to get acquainted with the girls, because the school gets attacked. And here we can see again that this game has potential to be something good. We have this cutscene where the girls slowly dispatch the zombies from the schoolyard. It does look a little barren, but at least it's trying to make use of the medium we call games. But wait, what's that? They use the same animation for this mission as in Chapter 5, Section 2. I'm all for reusing assets, but the least they could have done is to change the background. The funny thing is that they do reuse models wisely by sticking blue crystals on the zombies we fought last time. Still lazy as fuck, but at least something. Cliche as the story is, at the end of the chapter, Oboro flees, and we move on to the next chapter, back to Vietnam, where the visual novel explains again how the Republic of Vietnam was bombed, even though we just experienced it. You could get rid of all of this text and it would change nothing. Are you ready for the next political hot take from this predatory, bare-bones, badly paced, low-effort gacha game? The UFS and the PLA are not working together on a cure for the zombies because solving the problem first would make them look better. Wow! Riveting political commentary! Wow! Good, well made. Good job. Even though we could have done nothing to stop the attack, everyone is moping, which is the one thing I get. Of course you would be disappointed in yourself if your only job is to stop terrorist attacks and because you didn't check your info, a whole place got bombed. The consequence of your failure leads to Oboro, one of the most dangerous criminals, escaping your facilities, and on top of all of that you find out that Mr. Evil Evil is not the original Evil Evil. Actually, you don't know that yet. We are here in Vietnam to find that out. Of course, because the writing can't get away from its hentai roots, we get this lovely interaction where we find out that Murasaki asked for Asagi's used towel. Nice. All of this is followed up by the description of how you and your posse move through the destroyed island and how the UFS soldiers seem to be tense, and we find out that there are cyborgs in the UFS. We meet Asagi and Murasaki starts immediately drooling over her. Finally, we meet James, and he tells us that we are now on a rescue mission because the team that was supposed to retrieve Avalon's body didn't come back. A few problems with all of this. It is extremely jarring how the visual novel jumps from political commentary to a haha funny hentai to descriptions of scenes that can be completely cut out without changing anything. I already explained how lazy the visual novels are, but this is a whole other level. Instead of changing the background to show that we're changing locations, it's the same background even though we move from one point to a completely different point. At the end of the mission, we're supposed to be in front of a building and all you can see is the background of a destroyed city. If you still believe this is not lazy, we have a section where the lolly doesn't get that James is technically speaking our superior and has to be shut up by Murasaki. Instead of actually aligning the model so that Murasaki is holding her hand in front of the lolly's mouth, we have an ape-posing lolly in the background and Murasaki in the idle animation in front of her. Don't tell me that this is not technically possible because in the game itself there's literally a model of every character you can play that you can pose as you like. This is just lazy. You know what's also lazy? Reusing the sewer stages. But it makes sense story-wise, you know, because we're in the same place. It is okay to be lazy sometimes when it makes sense, but in this game the laziness is a bit much. In the sewer we meet Emily, who is not a Taimanin, but has an exoskeleton, making her strong as a Taimanin. And I can keep wailing on this game because we meet Emily in a cutscene, which is immediately followed by the description of Emily in the fucking visual novel, and if you haven't noticed yet, the background here is just a screenshot from the fucking level! Are you convinced yet how lazy this shit is? So, in this part of the visual novel, we found out a bunch of stuff. King Evil was part of the Japanese government. The Chinese has cloning technology and might be working with a demon organization named Nomads, and there's no cure for the zombies. Wait, are they trying to account for the fact that they're killing people? Call me impressed. The explanation is still stupid because the only reason we can turn back humans is because they have been changed on a genetical level. In this world where magical ninjas exist and technology exists to change someone genetically, you're telling me that nobody has figured out how to reverse the process. Sure, buddy. We can't stay serious for long enough because Emily's in love with Asagi, well, with Asagi's body specifically, but this of course makes Murasaki a little bit jelly. Have I mentioned that they are supposed to be running in this part of the visual novel? Those characters really look like they are sweating. Emily's obsession with Asagi's body is not as nefarious as you think because she wants to use the particles that are responsible for Taimanin powers to create technology that would help, for example, paraplegic people. Again, color me impressed, Emily's actually a good person. You might have noticed that I haven't talked about the gameplay for a while, and that is because the gameplay has not changed at all. It's still the same, and the only thing that has changed is that to keep up with the whole game, I had to upgrade my character. Guess what also doesn't change? The sewer. Yeah, we're still in the sewers. Chapter 7 and 8 are completely placed in the sewers, with the same enemies, the same flatly lit environments, and the same bosses, but with crystals or tentacles now sticking out of them. We do eventually find Ninja Evil's body, but some demon girl cucks us, and for a second, we see that this game can have cutscenes. Unfortunately, the cutscene was prefixed by a visual novel segment that explains the cutscene that we just saw. Demon Girl makes evil imp small and pockets him, and we flee the sewers. It turns out that the ninjas that we just fought were infected by demon parasites and a part of the group called Freedom of Africa. So, what you're telling me is that the bad guys are black, the good guys are Japanese/American, and the semi-good guys are Chinese. Am I understanding this correctly? Again, call me cynical, but I don't think that this game is handling its analogies very well. Be that as it is, this is where the story ends. I assume the story will continue as long as the game makes money and will continue to be lazy, uninspired visual novel garbage with hints of potential here and there with 1 or 2 cutscenes in the chapters. What? You thought this would be a finished game? Yeah, no. Might remind you that this game has a positive rating on Steam. Anyways, all of this has been played on easy, so I think we should move on to normal. And it's the exact same gameplay with a few attacks that are different from certain enemies. Most of the stuff stays the same. Once we're done with normal, we reach the hard difficulty, and here is where the game becomes interesting, and at the same time we see how nefarious gacha systems can get. It is possible to do the hard difficulty if you have an underlevel character. The main problem is that it will take forever to beat even low level grunts, and every damage will kill you almost instantly. I think this is where the base difficulty should lie around. More enemies per wave, more waves, more damage, and more grunts at the boss stage, even though it's cheap boss design. Hard difficulty would be okay if there wasn't the mix of the energy system and the upgrade systems. In a game where the playtime is gated, you don't want to waste energy playing something you don't enjoy. If you want to upgrade your character though, you will need to grind earlier stages or daily missions, wasting your energy and therefore your playtime. Upgrading your character though makes the game easier, defeating the whole purpose of having an easy, normal and hard difficulty. Of course, this is all by design. The game wants to convince you that there is more gameplay waiting for you if you upgrade your character for long enough, so that you can attempt the hard difficulty, and while there are different attack patterns from grunts in normal and hard difficulty, the main gameplay stays exactly the same. I haven't even touched on the Magatama, the supporters and the upgrade systems, because I think they are as much of a distraction for lack of content as the gacha system itself. But I think this would be incomplete if it didn't touch on them. Wrong.
That is-
This part was boring, so I just cut it. Listen. There's only one reason why those systems exist. It's wasting your time. All of these systems are wasting your time. The energy system, the character levels, the weapon levels, the difficulties, and the supporters. You could balance this game so that you unlock those things naturally as you conquer every stage, but that would mean that you would finish the game at some point, but that's not what makes money. The game is trying to create an environment that convinces you to come back again and again without actually offering you much progress, and most people fall for that, especially because of the boobies. If that wasn't bad enough, in the game we have 4 different types of currency: gold, crystals, mileage, and orbs. Then we have 2 different types of energy, BP and AP. Already explained why energy's garbage system and AP and BP fall under that. Gold doesn't need explaining, but I think it's worth looking into crystals. Wrong again. There's no reason to have a second currency in your game. They do give you breadcrumbs, but it's never enough to outright buy certain things in the game. All of this is by design. The devs are trying to give you the feeling of progress, but not actually giving you a decent amount of progress. I think the biggest slap in the face though is that the game will constantly try to tell you that they are being so gracious towards the player by showing that the price of a gacha is now 25 or even 50% off, or that the energy cost of a mission is halved, or giving you gifts for your daily login. Some people might fall for that, but you can't forget that this is a problem that the devs created, and the only solution is money. Since we're talking about cash, let's have a look at the gems themselves for a moment, shall we? We have several different offerings when it comes to gems. You can either buy the monthly pass, which gives you 440 gems in total, or you can buy gems in packs of 10, 45, 150, 330, 620, and 1450 gems. Every price is given the .99 format, which is an old marketing trick to try to convince you that you are not paying the higher amount that you're actually paying. .99 sounds really appealing, but in reality it's just $1. $17.99 sounds really like 70, but in reality it's 80. Really shady, supermarkets do that as well, and it sucks there as well. The interesting part here is that one gem can either cost 1 cent or 10 cents, depending on which pack you buy. Of course, the reason that is offered here for the price discrepancy is that you are getting bonus gems the more money you spend on the game. Again, just a marketing trick to convince you that you're getting a better deal, which objectively you are getting. Still, it's scummy as hell. What is also weird is that you can't buy exact amount of gems you need to buy most stuff. There are 3 things that you can buy with 10 pack of gems, those being energy refills and accelerators for training. And there are certain costumes they can buy with 150 gem pack. Everything else has to be coupled together by buying different types of packs or one pack several times. Meaning that at the end, the prices of those digital goods can vary highly. One costume can either cost $15 if you buy them with 10 gem packs, or it can cost $7.50 if you buy them with the 1450 gem pack. All of this is garbage anyways, because the only reason the gems exist is to hide the money you're spending on the game. Did you even know that a costume costs $50? I bet you didn't. For my girl Asagi alone, if you want to buy her and all the costumes, assuming you are buying the biggest gem pack, you would be paying roughly $128. Now question yourself, is this game worth $128? No, it's clearly not, and as I'm writing this whole thing, they released an update that allows you to have one more skill per character for only $29.99, basically $30 per month. Do I need to add anything? The story is garbage, and I bet nobody thought about the implications of what is actually happening on the stream because of the boobies. It's lazily written, it's lazily animated, and by the end of it, I still have no connection to any of the characters. One thing that stood out was the voice acting, but even that was hit and miss. The music is more questionable, and the sound effects can get quite jarring. The environments took with every chapter dip in quality and were sometimes just copies of each other. It is really telling when basically 3 chapters take place in the sewer. Gameplay wise, it starts to get interesting once you reach harder difficulties. The bosses are still janky and unfair since they have this weird tracking, even if you dodge correctly, but the game undermines its own difficulty by implementing several different types of leveling. On top of that, the gameplay is time gated to entice you to spend money so that you can play more at the same time, hiding what you're actually spending on the game behind a bullshit currency that either can be 1 cent or 10 cents worth. The game uses every manipulative tactic in the book to get you to spend money on the game, which in itself is not the worst thing, but if the goal of the game is not to sell you the game itself, but rather a solution to a problem that the devs created themselves, that's where they draw the line. Finally, this game should not have a good rating on Steam. You can be a troll and comment, "Wow, this game saved my marriage," and still give it a bad rating at the same time. I know most people who give this game a good rating are just here for the boobies, but I want my booby games to have actual quality. Just because everything is hypersexualized and made for a smartphone, it shouldn't get a pass. And I do truly think that this game is harmful because once it gets in your head, it will slowly develop a routine of opening the game, playing it a bit, upgrading your characters, and thinking about the next time you can play the game again. As I write this, I feel like a fool because I feel being sucked into this routine. Even for people that think they can handle it, you probably can't. It is made to make you addicted, and that's not the good thing. There's a good game here somewhere, but it's buried on so much garbage that I have to advise you to not play this game. I think it can be actually harmful, and these types of business practices should not be normalized, neither here nor in Japan. The only thing I can say now is take care of yourselves and have a nice day.